The fact that Uncharted 4 runs on the base PlayStation 4 is actually insane. And I am serious because if you think about it, this is a game with subsurface scattering on every main character's skin, cloth simulation on Nathan Drake's shirt that reacts to wind and water, hair that simulates strand by strand, a 6-kilometer drivable Madagascar valley with no loading screens, real-time mud that builds up on the tires of a Jeep and then washes off in puddles, an entire cargo ship the player can climb during a literal storm at sea, dynamic global illumination, sub-pixel anti-aliasing, and a moment where you slide down a wet hillside and watch every individual blade of grass bend the wrong way under your boots. All of this running on a console released in November 2013 with a laptop-grade AMD Jaguar processor at around 6 GHz and only 8 GB of shared GDDR5 memory for the entire system. To give you an idea, most gaming PCs today have twice that amount of memory dedicated just to the graphics card, not counting the system RAM. And before this video is over, I am going to show you the exact second the engine cheats in plain sight during the Madagascar chase, the development moment where Sony almost pulled the project, and a clever technique Naughty Dog used to simulate a world 4 times bigger than the PS4 could fit in active memory. But first, we need to talk about what was really fighting them. The number one enemy of Uncharted 4 was not the processor, it was not the memory, it was not even the storage, it was time. Time, scope, and ambition all clawing at each other over scraps. Naughty Dog had committed to a generational leap on hardware that was already 2.5 years old, with a creative direction that fell apart mid-production, and the team had to rebuild the entire game while shipping it. Let me set the stage. The PlayStation 4 launched in November 2013, 8 GB of unified GDDR5 memory at 176 GB per second of bandwidth, a 184 teraflop GPU, and a CPU that was not really a console CPU at all. It was 2 quad-core AMD Jaguar modules, the same architecture you would find inside cheap Windows laptops at the time, around 6 GHz per core, 8 cores total, only 7 of which were available to developers. Sony reserved the 8th core for the operating system, the party chat, the trophy notifications, the download queue. So Naughty Dog had 7 slow cores, about 6.5 GB of memory after the OS took its cut, and a 500 GB mechanical hard drive that read at around 100 megabytes per second on a good day. That is the hardware. That is the room they had to build the most expensive PlayStation game ever made inside of. Now, in earlier Uncharted games, the team had a different problem. Uncharted 2 and 3 shipped on the PS3, which had a weird 7-core cell processor and only 256 megabytes of main memory and another 256 megabytes for graphics. Tiny, bizarre, but fast in the right hands. The PS4 was the opposite. Generous memory pool, modest CPU. Naughty Dog had to throw out half of what they knew. The streaming engine that powered Uncharted 3, the lighting tricks, the character pipeline, all of it had to be rebuilt for a machine that was bigger but slower per clock. That is the historical baseline. It is short on purpose, because the real story is not where they came from. It is where they were trying to go. But Uncharted 4 aimed to do something almost arrogant. Naughty Dog wanted to ship a Hollywood-grade action movie that you could actually play. They wanted real cloth, real hair, real skin. They wanted full performance capture, where the actors performed face, body, and voice in the same take. They wanted streaming open levels with no loading screens. They wanted the Jeep chase to be one continuous shot. They wanted weather. They wanted water. They wanted 30 frames per second locked. On paper, this should not have been possible. So instead of brute forcing every system, the Naughty Dog engine cheats beautifully, aggressively, constantly. Imagine a magician's stage. You are watching the trick from the front. The cards move, the dove appears. But behind the curtain, there are 6 assistants, a trapdoor, a wire, and a second magician you never see. Uncharted 4 is that stage. Almost nothing in the world is fully there at any given moment. The level 100 meters in front of Nathan Drake is at full quality. The level 100 meters behind him has already started to unload. The grass off camera is not simulating physics. The buildings on the far ridge are a single polygon with a baked image of a building painted on top, and the engine swaps these pieces in and out of memory faster than your eye can catch. That is the central trick. Everything is staged for the camera you are looking through, and only that camera. If you have played the Madagascar chapter, you might have noticed something the first time you drive that Jeep down the long valley road. The world keeps unfolding. There is never a loading hitch. The river on your left flows past you for what feels like a kilometer, and yet you never see a doorway, never see a tunnel, never see the camera cut. That is not because the entire valley is sitting in memory. The PS4 does not have enough memory for that. What is actually happening is the engine is reading chunks off the hard drive in a strip just ahead of where you are about to drive and dropping the chunks behind you the moment they leave the camera. It is a conveyor belt of geometry. If you have ever heard a soft mechanical hum get a little louder during that exact chase, that is your PS4 hard drive working at the absolute edge of what it was rated for. We will come back to that. I do not know if you have ever paid attention to Nathan Drake's shirt during a rainstorm in this game. Try it. Load up the Scotland chapter, get to the part where it is pouring, and just look at the fabric. It darkens in patches. It clings to his back where the water hits hardest. It moves independently from his chest when he turns. That is a real-time cloth simulation running on a 2013 laptop CPU. Naughty Dog talked about this at GDC in 2017. They built a custom cloth solver that only runs at full quality on Drake himself. Every other character in the same scene is using a cheaper version. The villains get a simpler shirt. The crowds get no simulation at all. The engine spends its budget where your eye is looking, and your eye is almost always on Drake. If you do not believe that, try a little experiment. In any open chapter, turn the camera away from Drake for 10 seconds. Spin around, look at a wall, then snap back. For a fraction of a second, before the engine catches up, you can sometimes see the lower quality version of Drake's shirt before the high quality solver kicks back in. It is the engine getting caught with its pants down, just briefly. Just enough to remind you that the magic trick has a second magician. And here is where the physical breaking point kicks in. Let me talk about the Madagascar Jeep chase. This is the sequence Naughty Dog devs Kurt Margineau and Sean Eskeig have publicly broken down. The chase is roughly 6 minutes of unbroken gameplay. Drake is driving, Sam is shooting, vehicles explode, buildings collapse, a market gets torn through, and the entire thing is one continuous stream. The team had to solve 3 problems at once. The Jeep moves fast, which means the streaming budget per second is huge. The destructible buildings have to load their broken state before the player gets there. And the AI has to keep the convoy of enemy vehicles believable while the world around them is constantly being swapped in and out. Naughty Dog's solution was to pre-bake almost every explosion. The buildings do not actually break in real time. They play a recorded animation of braking that is triggered when Drake's Jeep crosses a specific line. The enemy convoy is not really driving. They are on rails. Their position relative to Drake is scripted. The illusion is that you are chasing them. The reality is they are chasing you, just always staying the right distance away. It is a treadmill, and it looks like a movie. But let me come back to the streaming, because this is where the real engineering magic happens. 6.5 gigabytes of usable memory sounds like a lot until you start filling it with a generational leap. A single 4K character texture for Drake's face in Uncharted 4 is bigger than the entire video memory of the PS3. Naughty Dog quadrupled their texture resolution compared to Uncharted 3, which means a single uncompressed character head would eat through hundreds of megabytes if it was loaded raw. The engine does not load it raw. It uses aggressive level of detail swapping. Drake's face has multiple versions. The face you see during a close-up cinematic is the high one. The face you see during a long shot is a lower one. The face you see when Drake is a dot on the horizon is just a colored blob. The engine switches between these as the camera moves, and the switch is hidden behind motion, dust, smoke, or a literal jump cut whenever possible. And here is where the engineering miracle gets really specific. Naughty Dog's automated level of detail system, which they talked about at GDC, was capable of generating these lower quality versions of every object in the game without an artist doing it by hand. They had levels the size of their E3 demo with tens of thousands of unique objects and an algorithm that decided in real time which version of each object to draw. A tree in the foreground might be 1,000 polygons. The same tree on a distant ridge might be 16. The same tree as a smudge on the horizon might be a single flat sprite, and the swap happens between frames so you never see it. Unless you stop, snipe the horizon with a long lens, and look really carefully. Then you can sometimes catch the trees popping a quality level as the camera lens magnifies them. Let me talk about lighting. Uncharted 4 uses physically based rendering, which means every surface in the game has properties for how rough it is, how metallic it is, how much light bounces off it. The PS4 does not have the horsepower to compute all of that in real time at full fidelity, so the engine bakes most of it. The global illumination, the ambient occlusion, the bounce light off a yellow wall onto Drake's white shirt, almost all of that is pre-computed and stored in the level data it is painted on. When Drake walks into a new room, the engine reads which baked lighting probe is closest to him and uses that to color the dynamic objects. The room looks alive, but the lighting has not actually changed for hours. It was decided by an artist months before you ever loaded the chapter, and this had real consequences for the hardware. Players reported that during the Madagascar chase specifically, base PS4 consoles got noticeably hot. The fan profile on the launch PS4 was not great to begin with. Uncharted 4 pushed it harder. Some owners described the sound as a hairdryer running across the room. Some described the case getting warm enough to be uncomfortable to touch. The mechanical hard drive in the launch units was the part doing the most work. It was streaming data at near peak rate for minutes at a time. Owners of the early 2013 launch consoles reported clicking sounds. Some described stutters during very specific moments, almost always the same moments, which is the dead giveaway that the drive was hitting its read ceiling. None of this was a defect. The console was being asked to do exactly what it was rated for longer than most games asked of it. And this is where things get really interesting if you compare it to its peers. The Witcher 3 came out in 2015 on the same PS4. CD Projekt Red built a massive open world, but they accepted a different trade-off. They allowed a 30-second loading screen when you fast traveled. They allowed the frame rate to dip into the low 20s in busy cities. They allowed pop-in. Their world was bigger, but the engine was honest about needing breathing room. Halo 5 on Xbox One in 2015 took a third path. 343 industries locked the campaign at 60 frames per second by cutting split-screen co-op and dropping the resolution dynamically. They sacrificed fidelity for smoothness. Uncharted 4 sacrificed neither. The frame rate held, the fidelity climbed, the loading screens disappeared, and the world got smaller in the right places in ways the player would never notice unless they were specifically looking for the seams. They paid for that decision with time and people. Development of Uncharted 4 took roughly 4 years. Around 300 people were credited on the final game. The reported budget, including marketing, was in the range of $90 to $100 million, with one Sony marketing manager calling it PlayStation's largest software investment ever. Production was rebooted partway through. The original creative director, Amy Hennig, left the studio. Neil Druckmann and Bruce Straley took over, scrapped roughly 8 months of existing story work, and rebuilt the game's narrative spine from scratch while the engine team was still trying to ship the technology. Crunch became the rule, not the exception. 12-hour days and longer became normal for the final stretch. Bruce Straley said afterward that he would never want to do Uncharted 4 again, and he left the studio not long after release. The cost was real. It is in the credits, if you read them. And yet, and this is the weird part, Uncharted 4 sometimes loses something in the process when you replay it on modern hardware. The Legacy of Thieves collection on the PS5 runs the same game at 60 frames per second, at native 4K, with faster loading. By every measurable axis, it is a better experience. And yet, the original base PS4 version had a kind of staged magic feeling that the modern version does not quite reproduce. The constraint forced Naughty Dog to choreograph the camera, to hide the seams in motion, to stage the destruction so it always lined up with a cut. When the hardware is fast enough to brute force the same content, those staged moments stop feeling staged. They just feel rendered. The Madagascar chase on PS5 is technically better in every metric and somehow less impressive to watch because you can tell the machine is no longer working at the edge. That edge was the personality. Uncharted 4 sold over 16 million copies. It launched on May 10, 2016. It won Best Narrative and Best Performance at the Game Awards in 2016. It won Best Game at the British Academy Games Awards in 2017, where it received 8 nominations. It was the most awarded Game of the Year in 2016 across the major publications and critic ceremonies. The first week alone was over 7 million units sold worldwide. The entire text you provided is already in English, so here it is exactly as written. The cargo ship chapter still gets cited in design talks as one of the best linear set pieces in the medium, and the Madagascar Valley is still studied as the prototype for what Naughty Dog would later attempt in The Last of Us Part 2. Uncharted 4 is not just a great action game, it is a quiet engineering miracle that most people will never fully understand. So, what do you guys think of Uncharted 4? Do you still play it? Let me know down in the comments. That was it for today's video. A subscribe would be appreciated. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.